In 2017, a mysterious underground kingdom filled of bugs captured the hearts of gamers everywhere. But behind Hollow Knight's success is a story of uncertainty, doubt, and a tiny team with an enormous dream. This is how Hollow Knight was made. It all started with a game jam back in 2013. Ari Gibson and William Pellin submitted Hungry Knight, a buggy little prototype about a sword-wielding insect who fought monsters in the dark. It wasn't polished. In fact, it barely worked. But the idea stuck. They were both working day jobs and doing game jams on the side. Gibson was an animator. He was known for his surreal and atmospheric visuals. Pellin, on the other hand, was a designer. He was a coder. So the both of them just happened to work together beautifully. And the two of them shared a love for classic games like Zelda 2 or Metroid. Games where you weren't having your hand held. And one of the things that they loved the most about these games is that you were able to explore these abandoned ancient cities. They were these worlds that felt ancient and aged and just so far out of reach. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Well, that brings me into 2014. They decided to turn this buggy little prototype into a game. They started building what would become Hollow Knight. They used Unity's 2D toolset to bring this hand-drawn world to life. Gibson animated every frame by hand on paper before bringing it to a computer. And they designed the game around tight movement, tons of secrets, and limited storytelling. The world of Hollow Nest wasn't just a backdrop for them. It was the way that they told their story. It was a puzzle to them, and every new area within Hollow Nest had its own story to tell throughout the silence of the world. Now, all of this sounds easy, but it wasn't. They almost didn't go through with their Kickstarter. In late of 2014, they launched the Hollow Knight Kickstarter with a goal of raising up to 35,000 Australian dollars. And right before they launched it, they were panicking. They were debating with each other whether they wanted to cut the price down by $5,000 and ended up going through with 35,000. They weren't really sure that anyone was going to care about their game, especially back in this time when they didn't have a publisher and they didn't have any media trail. Just the opposite happened. The community rallied behind them. They loved the game. They had over 2,000 backers on their Kickstarter, and the campaign ended up finishing while hitting its goal, and it raised up to 57,000 Australian dollars. And that was enough money for them to bring in two more people to their team, David Kazi and Christopher Larkin. David Kazi was a technical director, and Christopher Larkin was their composer. So together, they had a team of 4, and they were ready to start working. With their newfound group of talent, their ambitions with the game started to rise, as does every indie game. The scope creep crept in. Say that 5 times fast. The scope creep kept... They started layering in fast and responsive combat. It was inspired by Mega Man and Souls-like games. The player's movement was supposed to be limited at first. They did this purposely to encourage you to revisit areas that you might have missed before. With abilities like Mantis Claw and Monarch Wings, you were able to go back and revisit and unlock these new areas. The game didn't rely on tutorials, and it definitely didn't hold your hand. Everything in this game you learned by trying, and if you died, you would try again. But just as the world was starting to form, so did the music. Christopher started crafting a sweeping orchestral score. It was somber and eerie, and it had this deeply emotional feel to it. His music became a huge part behind Hollow Knight's soul, and Hollow Nest, it just kept growing. And that leads me into February 2017. Hollow Knight finally releases. Hollow Knight launched on PC with little fanfare. No marketing campaign, no publisher, no big media push. It was just a small game about some weird bugs, and it blew up. The players fell in love with its layers, with its depth, and all the secrets that were inside of Hollow Nest. They fell in love with the sadness of the environment, the story, and the music. By the time this game released on Nintendo Switch in 2018, it already sold millions of copies. Streamers and critics around the world call this a classic Metroidvania masterpiece. That's when this game flipped from being a hidden gem to a landmark in the indie game atmosphere. But Team Cherry didn't stop there. They released 4 massive free DLC packs: Hidden Dreams, The Grim Troop, Lifeblood, and Godmaster. These added new bosses, new lore, new combat, new music, and new endings. And the community, it exploded again. Speedrunners pushed this game to its limits, while modders built their own challenges and artists drew tons of thousands of fan art to post to Twitter and Reddit. This game was exploding day after day. Team Cherry didn't just build a game. They built a world gamers wanted to be involved in. In 2019, they announced they're going to make a sequel, Silksong began as a DLC, but it turned into something so big, it turned into its own game, which we're still waiting on today. Lots of delays have followed with this project, and we honestly don't really have an answer about it. But the anticipation for this game is still sky high. So what does that mean for the legacy of Hollow Knight? Hollow Knight went from a shaky Kickstarter to a best-selling classic. This game single-handedly redefined the indie game genre. It wasn't a giant studio, it didn't rely on ads, it just had its own world, and it relied on that to let the players fall in love with the world. So for indie developers out there, it's a lesson for us. We don't need millions of dollars to make a game. You just need to be honest with your game and to have a bug with a nail. And that's how Hollow Knight was made. And consider checking out the game I'm working on. It's called Driftwood Diner, and you can wishlist it now on Steam. So thanks so much for watching, and let me know what you thought about the deep dive. I plan on doing a ton more of these, so if that's something you're interested in, then consider subscribing. Hopefully, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. And if you're still waiting for Silksong like I am, stay patient. The best things take time.